Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
I thought I was going to hear Rich.
Vince, I know you're waiting for me to say the word cars, but...
Cars, he said it. Hey, I'm so glad you mentioned cars. I'll tell you why. Because after you give us the update...
you know what, I think you have a list there in your office where when I even imply the word car or vehicle, I think you have a list of bullet points that you go through.
Yeah. Well, there is a word detection system, and whenever it hears the word CAR, the red light lights up, and so I know.
Yeah,
even if I missed it, it does. And really, but since you mentioned cars, I will be talking after you give us the update as to what's happening in the District of Criminals. I'm going to be talking about some things that people don't know about. I guarantee that I will try not to get too technical, but I will tell you about problems with the couple hundred sensors your car may have and what these darn things do and how the symptoms do not directly relate in one's mind to what the cause is. And it's hard to believe. Like, it's kind of like your elbow hurts, but the problem is with your ankle. It's like that far out. And so I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about some tips, from the book. And, so that's what I'm going to do for the next hour. Now tomorrow, Bert is going to be interviewing me about what makes our house different, what makes our farm different. How did I wire it with our son differently? And these are tips that you can deploy in your setting. Okay, these are pretty interesting, and I haven't seen some of these done anywhere. Okay, but they make a lot of sense to me. So that'll be tomorrow. And then I got an email from Kathy. It's a pretty interesting email. Let me see if I can find it. Kathy said to me, Vincent, is it possible for me to interview you? I would like to ask you about simple preventative maintenance on dishwashers, washing machines, dryers, stoves, refrigerators, wood furniture, and those kinds of things. I believe it would be a benefit for people to know how to care for their household items. And that was from Kathy. And absolutely, my response is, you've got a deal. I'd be delighted to do it. And here was my response. Kathy, sure thing, you've got a deal. I'd love to do that broadcast class with you. Next Friday, hour number 1 works for me. Let me know if it works for you. And I'm prepared to discuss the items on your list, especially washers, dryers, dishwashers, microwave ovens, stoves, water heaters, etc. And so I'm going to be doing that next Friday, hour number 1 with Kathy. So that's the end of one other thing. So I wanted to tell the class that the stars lined up just perfectly for many things happened. And with the stars lining up perfectly, I thought it would be a really neat thing to test our ability at USA Prepares. I'm talking about USA Prepares as a whole for durability. How durable are we at USA Prepares? How unnecessary am I? And I proved I'm unnecessary. And I love it because as a teacher, teachers love it when their students shine. And I'm talking about Rich Scheben, jumped in and went solo. No problem at all. He's done it before. Norm Shealy, solo. No problem. Kathy and Gwyneth, worked together. Thousands of miles apart, never met each other. Brilliant broadcast. As a matter of fact, the highest rating those two gals got on YouTube in a long, long time. Impressive. And Gwyneth, solo, in the dark, with barely enough battery to keep her phone working. I am so impressed. So I wanted to thank all of you for what you've proven. And what you've proven is USA Prepares is not dependent on me. It is durable, which is a real problem for our detractors. So I just want to tell you that, you may want to go sulk somewhere, but USA Prepares isn't going anywhere. It's not dependent on me. So thank you, instructors, so much for proving that to our class. Rich, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Vince. And I appreciate you giving me permission and inviting me today to rant for a little while. And whenever you give me the okay, I will start my rant.
Well, what you're going to be talking about is what's happening and how dangerous this is. I believe we have not discussed this at one iota, but I'm very interested in what you have to say. So please go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Well, everybody, thank you for being here. We really appreciate your audience. And what we try and do is do as much reading and research as possible to verify a lot of the false narratives that come from the powers that be and give you actual truth and facts to the best of our ability on how we can verify. And if we can't, speaking for myself, if I can't verify something and I say I've only seen this in one website or one location or one source, I throw that disclaimer out there. So that being said, I want to start with last night what happened at the Capitol. And there's that Viking person and a few other faces, and there's pictures that show that these people were basically mercenaries. They were photographed at the BLM and Antifa rallies with the same, often, outfit, just like that Viking. This is called a false flag. There's evidence that they came off of buses, and they started the charge to the Capitol. So remember, everything that comes from the mainstream media, and I've proven this 1,000 times over, is propaganda, hoaxes, false flags, and lies, and especially gaslighting. They will do anything to sell the narrative. White supremacists. All people really want is the Constitution, the rule of law, freedom, liberty, and justice. That's what the people want. And I have an advertisement here. It's called Antifa Comrades, that basically told people to show up wearing MAGA hats, using flags and Trump flags and whatever the patriots do in order to blend in. I'm looking at it right now, and if you look online, it's not that hard to find. Next, I want to talk about all the evidence that we have given over the past couple of months, and even before that, because we all knew this was coming. We all knew this was going to be stolen. We all knew that this was going to be an invalid third world banana republic election. I use the term elections in quotes. Before I talk about just some of that stuff, I want to make an announcement, and this was on AnnaVonRights.com this morning. In fact, I talked to Paul Stramer, who's Anna Von Wright's tech guy, and I don't typically name drop, but if you go on Anna Von Wright's, you'll see Paul Stramer right there because he publishes all of her stuff, and he happens to live here in northwest Montana already. Now, I talked to him. He feels that this is verified and it's valid, and what I'm talking about is that there's proof that Barack Obama and his people literally conspired to steal the election for Joe Biden. And this comes from whistleblowers in the Italian government. CIA operatives have been identified colluding with former members of the Italian government and the Italian defense contractor Lorenzo to upload the software used to reverse the electronic votes of Americans and artificially spin a Biden win. And this isn't alleged from what I'm hearing. This is confirmed, and I believe Sidney Powell is in the middle of this. Now, again, I I've only read this once. I talked to Paul Stramer, who's Anna von Wright's right-hand man, and I literally talked to him for probably 8 or 9 minutes tops because I was about ready to go on the broadcast here. So it means that the law enforcement professionals and forensic auditors responsible for the investigation have proof in their hands. That's what confirmed means. But, I want to talk about all the evidence that we've discussed. I mean, in the thousands, Chinese shipping receipts being recovered among hundreds of thousands of ballots in Georgia. Now, if this is true about the Italian government and the whistleblowers there, I want to remind people of just a little snippet in our rule of law. Whoever owing allegiance to the United States levies war against them or adheres to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort within the United States or elsewhere, is guilty of treason and shall suffer death or shall be imprisoned not less than 5 years. So I just felt it was important to mention that. But we've talked about the Insurrection Act of 1807, which should have been accomplished weeks ago. We talked about the Executive Order of 2018. I'm not going to go into details and specificity because I've spent hours on both of those. We've talked about the rule of law going to the highest bidder with hundreds of examples. We've talked about the declassifications, and I got a whole list of that. Basically, what we're seeing, folks, is that the word public servant and big corporations have been sold out to the highest bidder. The FBI, the DOJ, the CIA, our lawyers, judges, courts, all sold out to people. They're all bought and paid for. Even words are now redefined. Evidence, facts, even the word legal there's no qualifications, no merit, nothing to it. What we're seeing is unelected, non-earned, big money is going to be in charge of everybody. If they want to inject poison into you, they can. If they want to take away your child for whatever nefarious purposes, they can. There's no more rule of law. We are now a lawless country. And the people will no longer have representation. And if you say anything, you will be demonized, discredited, and delegitimized. Everybody who doesn't fall in line will be called a controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, conspiracy theory, basically anti-Islamist-phobe. And the people who are going to have the jobs are the submissive, the people who sell out for mediocrity, tyranny, participation trophies, the quitters, the tattletales, the snitches, the people who are offended, the excuse behaviors, the followers. This is what we're going to be the new norm. If we install somebody with all the evidence of Biden collusion with China, with Ukraine, with the confirmed emails, with the witnesses like Tony Bobolinsky, basically the U.S. will be an enemy occupied zone, and I don't say that lightly. I'll be back with a little more ranting after this next break, folks. We appreciate you being here.
I'm looking at an image from dailymail.co.uk, and in the background is the Capitol. In the foreground are a bunch of protesters. Right where the protesters are, there's a huge flash of light, bright white light. It was an explosion. It was from the police. It was a police munition that exploded right where the people are. The police also shot and killed / murdered a protester. A veteran. Female. Murdered her. There are 3 others who are dead, and I don't have all the information about that. But how could this possibly happen? How could this happen? But it did. And where did it happen? In the Capitol. Inside. Rich?
Well, thank you, Vince. We've talked about the connections to Soros, the smart meters, the Smartmatic, the Dominion donation, the board of directors, the kickbacks, the lobbyists, the investors, how the hardware was designed to create and software to create backdoor results. We talked about switching votes, thumb drives. We talked about internet connections, elections done by private companies. We talk so much about foreign intervention and collusion with these votes. We've talked about the forensic trails and how it's been proven, and a lot of these so-called powers that be don't want the ballots and the machines to be forensically checked, and the ones that were, like in Arizona, there was one county, 11% proved that it was switched to Biden. I mean, what we're seeing, math algorithms, discovered evidence, we have a national security collapse that we're seeing unfold in history. We have fraud and deception in broad daylight. Basically, the fraud is really on the Constitution in many areas, but especially with the state legislatures in these swing states and all around the country, really. Basically, state legislatures were illegally cast aside by the establishment, and they're the ones that should make the legislation for voting, not the state Supreme Court, not the governor, not the AG, the Secretary of State. You know, we've gotten to the point that everybody has sold out, or they've been threatened and blackmailed. It's really, basically, what this boils down to, people, is that law-abiding citizens have tried to use the process of the rule of law at every level, including the Supreme Courts, to Vice President Pence, to William Barr at the DOJ, and they all chose to represent the elite and the oligarchies and not the people. The word lawmaker is a bona fide official hoax. We are no longer a nation of laws. We are just, basically, we have lieutenants that are so submissive that they've bowed down to all the addictions and desires of the elite. Power, money, control, pedophiles, voter fraud, illegal criminal violations of the Constitution. Nothing will ever matter again. You just look at what's happened to the U.S. dollar just this morning. It's dropping like gravity. Not looking at evidence, not adhering to subpoenas, changing rules of laws in the last minute so the Democrats can win. And they're not even Democrats. This isn't a left-right paradigm. You will find out, people, it's going to be the aristocracy controlling and managing the serfs in every way. In so many ways, there's not enough time on this show for me to go through it, and I've gone through a lot of them in the past. All evidence, videos, witnesses, affidavits, math impossibilities mean nothing. Congress, Senate, Supreme Court, what you should do right now is just go home. Your theater is so obviously bought and paid for. You're no longer representing the people. You are now owned. You're run by the world aristocracy. I'll be right back after this break.
Rich Evans with us. Rich, I want to read an email that I got that's pertinent to what you're saying. And it was from one of our students here at USA Prepares, and I won't use the student's name. Hi, Vincent. Are you and or your sons thinking of coming on the 6th? That relates to going to Washington, D.C. And I got a link from this student. At the link, when I clicked on it, it went to Republic Broadcasting Network and was about a rideshare program. And the idea was you could get a ride to Washington, D.C. And my response was sort of like, no, I never thought about going. But I asked if any broadcasters were going. And the response I got, yes. John Stat, as in John Statmiller, is going. And so here's my thoughts. And I want to give a clear explanation why I wouldn't even consider going to Washington, D.C. with a rideshare. When I travel, if I'm going somewhere and other people are going, I drive. I drive my vehicle. I drive my vehicle because I know my driving skills. And I know my vehicles. And I know that the one I select will get me there and back. I don't get in a vehicle with other people driving because I don't know about their driving skills. I don't know if they pay attention. I don't know if they use cruise control. I don't know if they'll be talking on their phone while they're driving. I don't know if they'll be bebopping to music. I have no idea. I'm not getting in the vehicle with anybody. I drive. So it would never occur to me to get into a rideshare with someone I don't know. I don't know their vehicle. I don't know their skills. I don't even know if they have a license. I wouldn't even know them, would I? I don't know if they have COVID, had COVID. I don't know if they've got diseases. I have no idea. I don't know if they're undergoing radiation treatments. I don't know if they have chemotherapy, and there's chemotherapy that leaves their skin. It's on the seats and everything they touch. I don't know. So I'm not getting in a vehicle with somebody I don't know. I don't know if I would even be able to get back. I don't know if that person would leave me in a lurch and just take off. Leave me in D.C. with no ride home. I don't know. And neither does anyone else. And why would I go to Washington, D.C., where the Proud Boys are fighting with other groups? The police are fighting with everybody. The Black Lives Matter people are fighting. And then you have provocateurs. You've got all these factions that are converging, and nothing good can happen except to scare the pants off the people that call themselves lawmakers. And they're terrified. And they were protected by the military, or you can call them the militia. You can call them the police. I don't remember police ever looking like those guys. They had helmets. They had tear gas. They had explosives. They had riot guns. They had batons and shields and vehicles. They were ready. In terms of being outgunned, we the people were outgunned. Because a lot of people didn't have guns. But the other team did, meaning the police. And if you look at how these guys were prepared, you could hit these well-prepared National Guard people, the police, with a baseball bat, and you wouldn't hurt them. They were really, really protected. Personal protection. So, for the student who wanted to know if I was going, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because tear gas was used. Who knows what else was used? And wall-to-wall people breathing on each other. We're probably going to hear that this is a super spreader event. That'll take a couple weeks. I'm looking at the National Guard. Man, oh man. These guys were thickly, heavily protected. Gloves, shields, body armor, face protection, helmets. It looked like they were in combat. And you know what? They thought they were. So, yeah, the Capitol was breached. A military veteran, female, unarmed, was murdered by the police. Have there been charges? I don't know. I don't think so. Has the person, the cop who murdered her, been arrested yet? I don't think so. Has he been named yet? Or her named yet? I don't think so. Why not? How long do you think it would take for anyone else who's not part of the government to pull a gun and shoot someone in cold blood, unarmed, in the Capitol, and not be arrested? How long do you think it would be take for you to be arrested? Would it be a minute? Would it be 10 seconds? It would be the minute they threw you down to the ground and jumped on you, handcuffed you, and dragged you into a police car or paddy wagon. As Rich Scheben says, there's two sets of rules. There's rules for us and rules for them. That's just one example of it. And I think the outcome so far is based on a picture I see of alleged representatives cowering in the Capitol, ducking down, scared to death, with gas masks on because the people were outside. Caption under this picture of lawmakers lying down. You know how if you go to the movie theater, you sit in a seat, but there's a spot for you to walk to the seat, the floor? These guys were on the floor, lying down, gas masks on. And the caption says, lawmakers cower in fear as protesters try to break down the doors of the House chamber on Wednesday. The result of what has happened in Washington, the District of Criminals, in my opinion, is that these alleged representatives, the people who make rules for us to follow, not them, us. They have separate rules. They get away with murder. Those people that make rules for us have now been put on notice by the people that the people have absolutely, positively had it. In addition, some protesters went to Nancy Pelosi's house and they spray painted her garage door. They got that close. At USA Prepares, months and months and months and months ago, we said that this was going to happen. The Civil War will increase in veracity. The Second American Revolution combined with the Second Civil War is underway. It's increasing. And we said that it will be brought to the homes of these people who call themselves politicians. People who steal from everybody and give to their friends. Take bribes and pass laws that restrict commerce for everyone except their friends. They make backroom deals. We are now seeing evidence of some normal people, regular USA people, American citizens who have had it. And I see a lot of white people who've had it, who are protesting.
Vince, can I chime in real quick, buddy?
Yeah.
I appreciate it, because I want to finish my little rant, and I have to get going here, and
okay.
I'm looking at the clock, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Pardon the interruption, buddy.
Go ahead.
And I really appreciate you always letting me exercise my First Amendment rights. But going back to my rant, folks, everything that anybody who considers themselves an expert or an official authority is now null and void, okay? All these things that have happened, like Vince was just saying, and like I said earlier, the people tried to do the process of law. The courts, especially the Supreme Court, Vice President Pence, the DOJ, William Barr, they have sold out and decided to represent the big oligarchies and the elite and not we the people. This is what happens when there's no more choices, there's no more avenues, no one's willing to look at the evidence. There's no validation. It's not even adhering to subpoenas, changing the rules and the laws in the last minute. That's why there's no confidence in the system anymore, because the people don't have anywhere else to go to be heard. And they're sick and tired of the hypocrisies and double standards. You know, Mike Pence, Amy Barrett, you're always screeching the words God, Christ, religion, sacrifice, all this stuff. It means nothing. You're hypocrites. You're traitors. You're sellouts. You, all the entities and departments and people I named just this morning, the blood of Alicia Babbitt, the woman who got killed, her blood is on your hands. Your hypocrisy, your treason and sedition and obvious sellouts to the people caused this. You caused this. You spit on the graves of millions of combat soldiers who gave their life for our freedoms, liberty, constitution, the rule of law. You spit on them. Criteria for jobs, qualifications, standards now mean nothing. We used to be judged by patriotism, by intelligence, by courage. You have taken all that away from the people. Vince, that's all I have to say today. I appreciate you letting me exercise my First Amendment rights. And you have a good broadcast, okay, buddy?
Rich, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts. Class, what you're witnessing is an outrage. Thank you, Rich. What you're witnessing across the country, especially in Washington District of Criminals, is an outrage. The whole world is watching us. They're watching what happens when people abuse their authority. They usurp authority. That's what we're watching. You're not allowed to have a gun in Washington, D.C., rifle, pistol, shotgun, revolver, but Congress can. We'll be right back. So, class, you know I've assigned Combat, the television series from 1962 through 1967 with Vic Morrow and Rick Jason. Absolutely brilliant. It's about GIs, government issues in France. And they are having a tough time. Every kind of dilemma you could think of. Germans with their booby traps. Yeah. My dad was in World War II. And he told me back in the 60s, he said, the Germans would, am I allowed to say Germans? Huh. The Germans in World War II would booby trap things like a dead GI. They put a booby trap under him and we'd come along later and recover the dead body and move the dead body, turn him over and boom. Pictures would be hung on the wall, not vertical, like on a diagonal, slight angle. And Americans can't stand that. You walk into a house, an old farmhouse, and you see a picture a little sideways and you want to straighten it up, right? That's what we do. That's what Americans do. Well, the Germans would booby trap those darn things, and the unsuspecting GIs would go and straighten it out. Boom. You kill everybody in the room. They had tripwires. They would chain a cow to a post. The cow could walk around the post. But in the normal path to get from wherever you would be to where the cow is, be a landmine. That's what they did. That's just the tip of the iceberg of what they did. They would lie. And Americans are gullible. Americans want to believe. They want to believe what someone says. Well, here we are. And the reason I assigned Combat television series is you can learn a lot from it. You can learn about people who are cowards, You can learn about people who lie, cheat, steal, connivers. You can learn about soldiers. You can learn about tactics. You can learn about traitors. The Germans would dress up in a dead GI's uniform. They would infiltrate. I'm just trying to tell you, anything goes in war. You know, there are rules, but not everybody follows them. Combat, C-O-M-B-A-T, exclamation point. You can find it on YouTube. There's one available for sale right now. There are 5 seasons. There are 40 discs in the set. Make sure you get the region that will work for you in the United States, if that's where you are. And the lowest price I found is $54.37. I paid about $50 for mine used. And mine is the green one. It's the green cover. And there are 5 volumes within a box. And I've watched it a couple times. I think it'll be an eye-opener for many in the class. Combat. C-O-M-B-A-T, exclamation point. War is really tough. Really, really tough. And as Rich Scheben told us in class this week, the Marines can't find enough people who are not overweight and smart enough. So how is that possible? How is it possible that they can't find enough people who are cannon fodder? How is it possible that the Marines can't find a few good men or enough good men? Well, that would be the fault of the government. Because the government does not allow the complete listing, or they prevent the complete listing of ingredients in foods. They allow the food manufacturers to lie about the contents of what's in the box, package, bag, jar, or bottle, or can. They allow that. So our people, our children, our best and brightest are getting fatter by the second, eating things because they don't know what's in it. They brush their teeth with fluoride because they don't understand. They watch television, and then they go to the government training camp to learn how to be a complete idiot. So has your government failed you? Absolutely, positively. Just ask any student of the government training camp anything. Ask them to estimate something. Just ask them, how far is it from here to there? They won't be able to tell you. Because we forgot to teach that in school. I'll be right back. And I'm going to be talking about cars. Since Rich Scheben mentioned cars, I will spend this hour talking about cars and things you might not know about. So I was working on a Mercedes yesterday, 2004 E320. So that's a midsize. And the instrument cluster said there was a voltage problem or battery problem. So naturally, it's real simple. You know, if you raise the hood on this particular vehicle, there's a compartment that says battery in trunk. What does that mean? Well, it means there's a battery in the trunk. And that's where the battery is. It's in the trunk. But believe it or not, right under that access compartment, there's one little nut. It's a plastic nut that you unscrew, and it will let you lift off this cover where it says battery in trunk. And underneath that cover is the cabin air filter. And underneath that, when you lift off this cover, the cabin air filter comes off with it. The air filter attaches to the cover. And then exposed in full view of everybody is another battery. And this battery is called the auxiliary battery. It's the size of a motorcycle battery. I just looked up, I just typed in cost to replace, secondary battery or auxiliary battery, and it came up for a Mercedes S550. Now, the cost to replace this battery, according to this website called yourmechanic.com, says the average shop price is $377 to $1,766. Let me say that again. $377 to $1,766. That's the average shop price. Now, the average dealer price is a little bit higher. $554 to $2,756. $554 to $2,756. That's not $27. It's $2,756. The price on the internet, if you go to eBay to buy an equivalent battery, has to be an AGM, which means it does not have liquid electrolyte. It's got a gel, so you can turn the battery upside down. It won't leak. And sealed, so there are no gases to escape. The price on eBay is about $35, $36. Shipped. $35 or $36. The price at AutoZone, if you walk in as a, cash customer, is $110. And the AutoZone one has a 3-year warranty. So I bought the AutoZone one for this particular job. But I paid $85 for it. Because I don't pay AutoZone prices. And what we do here at our shop is we negotiate prices down, and then we pass the savings on to our customers. AutoZone likes it because we buy a lot of parts. They don't make as much money off each sale, but they make a lot of sales from us. Nobody buys at this particular AutoZone. Nobody buys more oil from them than we do. Nobody. When we go and buy oil from AutoZone, they have to pull it from 5 different stores because not one store has enough. 4 stores don't have enough. And we go with a truck and trailer and we load up. Now, why am I telling you about this battery? Because it is in a whole bunch of Mercedes. A whole bunch. The C-Class. The E-Class. The GLE. The R-Class. The GL. The GLA. The GLC. The CL. And, of course, the E-Class. It's a whole bunch of them. And what does it do? Well, no one's exactly sure on exactly what it does because Mercedes doesn't want you to know. But this auxiliary battery will last 4 or 5 years maybe. And when it stops working, things go wrong. Like, one of them is if you have one of these start-stop features, you pull up to a traffic light and you hit the brake and you're in drive, the engine shuts off, right? It's designed to do that, to save fuel. It beats up the starter because if you're in city traffic, you might stop and start your car 30, 40, 50 times a day instead of twice. It really eats starters. And this battery makes sure that happens. Now, think about this. What an idiotic design this is. So if you have one of these stop-start features and you engage it, and your battery warning light comes on and says the auxiliary battery is malfunctioning, what do? Well, the one thing you don't do is let this thing shut off because it may not start again. So there you could be at the traffic light looking really silly, right? Because the battery that you didn't know you had, that's under a cover that says the battery is not under the hood, it's in the trunk, is really under that cover that says the battery's not there. When that fails, you're not going to be able to start your vehicle with a stop-start system. It also affects braking. It also affects a whole bunch of other controls, and Mercedes isn't going to tell you what they are. Which explains why I spent $85 instead of $35 on that battery. Now, we don't have the stop-start feature on this particular vehicle I'm working on. It's not there. So I don't need to worry about that. But it controls other things. So I bought the battery. Now, I've been working on cars from probably, 55 years maybe. It's the first time I ran into this. This is idiotic. Now, it's believed that if you just, and this thing is the size of a motorcycle battery. It's tiny. You can fit it in the palm of your hand. It's the size of 5 slices of white bread. It's tiny. But you're not going anywhere without it. So, how do you replace it? Well, what I'm going to do, and I haven't finished with this yet because by the way, AutoZone had one. In the entire area, they had one. 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 So if anyone else has a problem, they're stuck because I bought the last one until I get another one. Is this nuts? I think it is. And the next guy's not going to get theirs for $85. They're going to have to pay the $110. Okay, so how do I replace this? Well, I'm going to make a tool. I'm going to take 4 alligator clips and 2 lengths of wire, probably, let's say 5 feet long. And I'm going to make 1 red and 1 black for positive and negative. And I'm going to hook up the new battery to the cables for the battery in the vehicle. That way, I'm ensuring that current will not be lost to all of the computers that this silly battery controls or powers. Because if I lose current, I might have to bring this thing to Mercedes so they can use their fancy computer to reset all of the settings necessary to make this car run again. That is a procedure that we are going to employ for all the battery swaps that we do. And we do some. Batteries fail, customers come in and their battery's kind of weak and they want another one. They want us to put it in, do it right. So we are going to make sure no current is lost between the swap of the old one and the new one, so the computers don't get confused. A vehicle came into the shop, and it had a warning light that is a GM truck. I think it was around 2010, 11, 12, 13, something like that. And it said that the StabiliTrak had a problem, traction problem. Stability traction problem. Sounds pretty serious, right? So what would you think? Where would you think that problem, if you were to put on your thinking cap and try to determine in your mind, where would the problem be? Would it be at the wheel? Could it be a wheel sensor? Yeah, could be. Could it be at the drive shaft? Could it be in the transmission? Yeah. Could it be a loose ground on one of these computers? Yep. Could it be a weak battery? Yep. It's a whole bunch of places that you can spend time looking for where the cause of this problem is. So the owner of this vehicle was talking to a mechanic, a local mechanic, not us. He said the problem was, well, that's because you've got your foot on the brake while you're starting your truck. Let me ask you, who doesn't do that? Who starts your vehicle without putting your foot on the brake? Who? I wouldn't even consider it. I always step on the brake when I start a vehicle. And I remember, and I mentioned this on the air before, when I was really young, I had a bicycle. It was the type of bicycle was called an English racer. That means it had handbrakes, thin wheels, thin tires. This was in the late 50s, 60s. I would squeeze the brake when I was getting on the bicycle, so it wouldn't roll. I mean, I've been stepping on the brake before going since I was before a teenager, like 8 years old. Who doesn't know that you step on the brake before you engage your starter? Who doesn't know that? Well, this mechanic was making stuff up, and he was wrong. Now I'm going to tell you what the problem was, and you're not going to believe it. When I tell you what the repair was, you won't believe this. Now, we have a sophisticated computer diagnostic tool. It's pretty darn expensive, and it helps guide us. It doesn't tell us, but it helps guide us to what the problems could be. And we got it right the first time. And I'll tell you what it is when we come back. I want to go back for a second to this idiotic secondary battery. So, let's say that light comes on and your battery fails. And you have the start-stop system engaged. That means you pull up to a traffic light, red light, step on the brake, and the system says, I guess we're stopped. Let me shut the engine off. Let's say you are 2 traffic lights away from the repair shop or the dealer. And your battery is gone and it's not going to start. What about that? Would you be frosted? I would. Do you think that salesperson at the dealership, Mercedes dealership, says, hey, listen, I just want you to know if this light ever comes on, make sure you are not in this stop-start mode because you're not getting here. Make sure. Do you think these idiotic salespeople at car dealerships tell you that, oh, by the way, listen, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about changing your tire. You'll never have to change your tire. You know, if you get a flat, you won't have to do that because there's no spare. Do you think they'll tell you that? Okay. Back to 27% of new cars don't have spare tires. That's the dumbest thing. Because the spare tire in the rear, laying horizontally in the trunk, is one more serious layer of protection for the occupants of that cabin, of that vehicle, against rear-end collisions. Somebody driving into the back of your vehicle. So if you're thinking you don't need a spare tire, that's foolish. You need a spare tire. And you need to make sure it's inflated. Because the last thing you want to do is take that spare tire out and say, I thought I had air in it. Back to the StabiliTrak system. Chevrolet. So, what was it? Well, in the steering column, you know, like you where you're sitting, like where your knees are, actually probably where your calves are. A little forward of that, there's a steering column. The steering wheel is connected to a shaft. And around that shaft is like a donut-shaped sensor. And when that fails, the steering wheel doesn't know what straight ahead is. It forgets. The stability traction control system is dependent on many sensors, and that's one of them. Which direction is the steering wheel pointing? 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, but it's in very fine increments. Not just, 4 positions. many positions in degrees. So when that sensor fails, the indicator comes on saying that you've lost your stability traction system. It doesn't know what to do because the steering position sensor has failed. But it doesn't say that's what it is. It just says you have a problem. Now, what does this cost? Well, the parts are between $120 and $250. Add the labor and you've got between $400 and $500. That's one sensor. Now, we replaced it. It fixed the problem right away. I mean, that was the cause. We diagnosed it, got it right the first time. And dealers say, well, if you bring it to them, they'll say, well, we think it could be this, but, we'll start with that. And if it's not that, it could be these other three things. And we'll replace them in order of likelihood of that being the problem. That's what dealers do. So we replaced it. And, it really wasn't stepping on the brake when the owner of this vehicle was starting the vehicle. I had nothing to do with it. So that mechanic has lost all credibility with this customer because it was the steering angle sensor or steering position sensor. Now this thing is like a donut, which means that you have to disconnect the steering wheel. You have to separate the steering wheel shaft so that you can raise the shaft up and move it out of the way so you can put the sensor back in, take the old one out, put the new one in. It's a pain in the neck and you're on your back upside down. The engineers at GM are at war with the mechanics. They are making it as difficult and complicated as possible for people like you to own a car. But they think you're just going to buy another one because the next one will be free from defects. It's like Windows. Each one gets worse. So we're talking about cars today. Rich Scheben mentioned cars, so I felt obligated to talk about them. And if you like this particular kind of broadcasting where we talk about things that no one talks about, I'm talking about automotive type problems, servicing equipment problems, things that where we can teach you how to save money and tell you how to prevent problems. If you like that kind of broadcasting, send me an email, instructor@usaprepares.com, instructor@usaprepares.com. And if you don't like it, tell me. And I'm sure that we've got some people who will tell me that they hate it. Well, okay, that's fine. I'd like to know either way. There's another sensor called a brake pedal switch. It's also called a brake position sensor. Now, you know what that does, right? You step on the brake, and if someone's outside your vehicle, looking at the rear of your vehicle while you're stepping on the brake, the lights light up saying that you stepped on the brake, right? That's what it does. It's one of the things that it does. It also does other things. And here's where the problems come in. So when you step on the brake, there is a multifunction switch, and it controls the stoplights on the rear of the vehicle. You know that. Car and truck. It also controls the stick shift selector, meaning let's say you have a Perlandl park, reverse, neutral, drive, low, automatic transmission. If that brake position switch, the contacts are worn, let's say you have 50,000 miles on it, these things fail all the time. We've replaced 3 of them so far. 3 on different vehicles, right? So they do 2 things. So you can step on the brake and have someone go look behind the vehicle and say, yeah, it's on. Yep. That's only half of what the switch does. The other contacts tell the computer that you stepped on the brake, which is independent of the lights. So if you think about this, can you have your have your vehicle in park, the engine running, so you're stopped, right? It's in park, the engine's running, and now you want to go. What's the first thing you do? You step on the brake. Then you move that gear shift selector into either reverse if you want to back up or drive. What do you think would happen if you did not, and you have a relatively new vehicle in the last 20 years, and you we're in park, the engine's running at idle, and your foot is off the brake. It's off the gas. Engine's just idling. And let's say it's in a location where you can go forward or backward and not bang into anything. And you just decide to move that gear shift lever into drive. It won't go. It's designed to be locked out. Now, when the brake position sensor fails in that secondary function, you're not going anywhere because the brake light switch has failed or is broken. Now, who would have ever thought that, right? Who would ever thought, well, I'm stepping on the brake, and you ask your son or daughter or wife or husband or bystander, hey, are the brake lights on? Yeah, they're on. It must be working. Not necessarily true. So a bad brake position sensor at the brake pedal of your vehicle can prevent you from putting your vehicle into gear if it has an automatic transmission. What else does it do? Well, those who use cruise control might find out their cruise control doesn't work anymore. Why? Because cruise control is absolutely dependent on sensing when you step on the brake, because that vehicle's just going to keep going forward until you step on the brake. Or it runs out of fuel. Or you crash. So here we have a brake position switch. It's called lots of different things. It's simple. And it's like the size of a domino. And it's easy to install in most cases. What's it cost? Between $50 and $120 to have that replaced. But it can cause you all kinds of problems that you haven't even considered relate to that silly switch. Now, it used to be that those switches just did one thing. They operated the brake lights, period. And it worked great. But now that it's more complex, the contacts seem to wear out faster on the other portion, not the brake lights. The part that controls the cruise control and the gear shift selector. Just one more sensor. How many sensors are in these vehicles? Well, typical new vehicle has between 60 and 200, between 60 and 200. And I just told you some of the costs to replace these silly things. Does anyone need cruise control? I'll tell you what, I will not be in a vehicle with anyone using cruise control, because if they can't pay 100% attention to what's in front of them, back and behind them, alongside of them, the speed they're going, the direction they're going, the conditions, obstacles, traffic, I'd be crazy. And I wouldn't trust some system to keep me going forward at constant speed. I have never, except for one time, used cruise control. And the only time I used it was to see what it was like. And I tried cruise control to see. Our vehicles have cruise control. But it's stupid to use cruise control. There are too many things that can go wrong. How many accidents has Vinny had? How many do you think? How many accidents do you think Vinny has had in his entire life? I know the number. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you, but I won't tell you today. I started driving around the late 1960s. So, how many accidents do you think I've had? Just send me an email. Instructor, INSTRUCTOR, @usaprepares.com. And I'll tell you next week. I'm interested to know how many accidents you think I've had. Okay, so let's talk about some of these sensors. There are a lot of them. Now, I'm just going to name a few of them. There are between 12 and 30 sensors that relate just to the engine. And then there's more. But I'm just going to tell you some of the sensors. There's a spark knock sensor. That determines if the engine is experiencing pre-ignition. You've heard it called knock. Well, it's also called pre-ignition. That's when the air-fuel mixture doesn't explode smoothly. It's a bang. It's rough on the engine. Sometimes it sounds like a can with a few marbles in it. It's really rough. So the octane rating of the gasoline is not sufficient for the spark advance. And that's kind of complicated. I won't talk about that. But what I'm saying is there's a sensor to reduce the timing, the ignition timing of the engine, so that the engine will not pre-detonate or knock based on the fuel that's being used. There's a crankshaft position sensor, also called a crankshaft angle sensor. There's a mass airflow sensor. There's a camshaft angle sensor or camshaft position sensor. There are, if you have a V engine, like a V8 or a V12 or a V10 or a V6, there may be up to 6 exhaust oxygen sensors. They cost about $50 a piece, and it is recommended that you replace them in sets. Let's see, 6 times 50. That's without labor, right? 300 without labor. So figure maybe another couple $100 in labor. Most engines have 4. There's an exhaust gas recirculation valve position sensor. Mass airflow sensor. Spark knock sensor, I mentioned that. A fuel vapor pressure sensor. Fuel temperature sensor. Why? Because fuel is more dense when it's cold than it is when it's warm. So there's a sensor to determine how much fuel should be sprayed through the fuel injection system into the engine based on the temperature of the fuel. Now, fuel temperature is somewhat dependent on how much fuel's in the tank, and it is largely dependent on the ambient temperature outside. So the fuel is recirculated back, the unburned fuel, unused fuel is recirculated back to the fuel tank. It's used to cool off some of the mechanisms in the engine. So it's a coolant as well as it cools off the fuel pump. Now, if you've got very little fuel in your tank and it's a hot day, you are likely to overheat your fuel pump and cause it to fail prematurely. Never let your fuel tank go below 1/4 of a tank. It's crazy. You're going to fill it up anyway, so don't let it go below 1/4 of a tank. Never. Because it causes undue wear on the fuel pump. There is a engine coolant temperature sensor, and that's reflected by the temperature gauge on your instrument cluster. There's an engine temperature sensor as well. There is an engine compartment temperature sensor. There's a manifold air temperature sensor. Then there's one that determines how fast the vehicle's going. That's a vehicle speed sensor. Then there's one on the drive shaft, how fast that thing's spinning. And then there's one in the transmission to determine the transmission fluid temperature. There's an anti-lock brake sensor. Now there's one at each wheel. There's 4 of them. Then there's a seat pressure sensor. So when you put your body in that seat, there's a sensor that says, oh, it's not empty. That works in conjunction with the seatbelt sensor. So they can say, wait, there's somebody in here and they haven't buckled up. So the computer tells you on your dashboard, seatbelt's not fastened. There is a windshield cracked sensor. So if you have a cracked windshield, it'll tell you that too. My AMX, my 1968 AMX doesn't have one of those. Neither does my old Chevy truck. There is a door ajar sensor. How many? Well, how many doors do you have? 2, 4, 5 in a station wagon? There's an air conditioning pressure sensor. Under pressure, over pressure. There is 2 of them. There is a heating and air conditioning temperature sensor. There's an outside air temperature sensor. You know that because there's a display on the dashboard on a lot of these vehicles that says the temperature outside. There's a steering angle sensor. I talked about that and what that darn thing costs to fix and replace and the problems it causes. StabiliTrak. It's a steering wheel sensor. And then there are multiple crash sensors. That's the tip of the iceberg, class. The tip of the iceberg. And of course, there are those sensors that determine how fast the windshield wiper should be going. Because the manufacturers don't think you know. So class, if you like this kind of broadcast class where I teach you about things like this so that you know in advance, let me know. And just send an email to instructor, INSTRUCTOR, at USA Prepares, USAPREPARES.com. And if you don't, let me know that too. So, we have had in the last few days, a few vehicles show up, their trucks, Chevy trucks, pickup trucks. And they have gone into limp, LIMP mode, which means reduced engine power. And one of them, it actually took 1 hour to go 1 mile up our dirt road to get here. Because it would go about a quarter of a mile and the engine would shut down, wait 15 minutes, go another quarter of a mile, the engine would shut down, and repeat until it went 1 mile to get to our driveway. It's still here. We haven't worked on it yet. That's today or tomorrow. Why? It's gone into this limp mode and the engine flat out won't run. The problem that we see with these is what's called a throttle position sensor. And there are a couple of them in many engines. And if they don't sync up, the engine won't run right. It's a big problem. So you can be left stranded because maybe the vehicle might go 30 or 40 miles an hour, maybe. But if you're pulling a trailer, you're in a tough spot because you won't have enough power to do it. And what causes this? Well, I looked it up. I've got it on the screen in front of me. And it says Repair Pal that the average cost for a throttle position sensor replacement is between $171 and $219. And so the parts are about $112. So if you bring it to a dealer, they'll probably, if you have this problem, they'll replace that for you and tell you that was the problem. And you'll be delighted to spend that money. Right. Well, here's what we find. We have found that prolonged idling in temperatures of about 31 degrees Fahrenheit when it's humid outside, like foggy. And that's what it was. It was foggy. 2 separate customers had exactly the same problem on the same day with different, they're both Chevrolet, but they were different models. Both of them idled the vehicles. And what happens is moisture accumulates as the engines idle, prolonged idling. I'm talking about, like, let's say you go to the Chinese factory outlet and one person goes in and you wait an hour and it's cold outside and you just run the engine. That's prolonged idling. Well, when the engine idles, it doesn't reach full operating temperature and you're extracting more heat out of the engine than the engine's producing, through the heater. So the engine runs at a lower temperature. So the air that is in the crankcase condenses. And the moisture in it condenses along the crankcase. And as it does, it gets pulled up through the positive crankcase ventilation system. And it gets plumbed into the air intake for combustion. And it condenses more and more and more. And so now you have an oily water mixture. Looks like yellow mayonnaise. And it confuses the throttle position sensors. And it puts you in limp mode. Now, did that dealer, the salesperson, say, just want to let you know that if it's 31 degrees outside, whatever you do, don't just idle your engine with the heat on. Because if you do, you're going to go into limp mode, and then you'll have to be towed to the dealer. Did they tell you that? I don't think so. So what do? We take a paper towel, and we disassemble the air intake system. We take a paper towel, And we wipe out all of that yellow mayonnaise goo. Then we use some carburetor cleaner and we clean it some more. And we put it back together, and guess what? It works. What I'm telling you is that there are so many sensors that get so confused, it's very, very difficult for the average person to figure out what's going on. Which brings me back to the question which you didn't hear asked. And it was from Rich Scheben. He's asked me this a couple times off the air. And I'm paraphrasing. And Rich said, hey, Vin, so if a person had a little bit of money, what new vehicle would you recommend that person buy? And after I calm down, I tell him, there's no such thing. Once he asked me, at what price would you pay for a new truck? $13,000 for a brand new truck? You know, like a $65,000 truck? And my answer was, Rich, there is no price that I would pay for a new truck because it'll leave me stranded. There's no price. Now, I did buy a new truck. I did. I love it. It's a 2001. It's a 20-year-old truck. And I got it from out of state. No rust. There's no such thing as a no rust truck in Missouri except for mine. It's a 2001 Chevy, short bed, 5-speed stick shift, short bed, no rust, crank up windows. It's got air conditioning. It's got tinted glass. Did I say it has tinted glass? Has windshield wipers, 4 tires, rubber mats, plain seats, manual transmission, E6. Did I say it has rubber mats?